Last week, we looked at David slaying the Philistine giant Goliath, a giant almost twice his size. There's another giant that David encountered that he was unable to slay, a battle that he was unable to win. And that battle involved none other than King Saul himself. Because you see, what we began to realize or see as we move away from the story, it actually starts the day of David's slaying of Goliath, because jealousy became something that Saul struggled with. And it took place, the flame of jealousy, that little flicker began that very day as a result of that, because what will happen is that David's popularity began to rise and Saul's popularity began to fall. And we could take it back to when Samuel had told him that God was no longer going to allow him to be king in Israel because he had not been faithful to God in honoring him. And God was raising up another man after his own heart. But in these years that take place between the time that Saul is told that this is going to happen and the time when he finally dies on the battlefield, we see the seeds of jealousy that are planted in his heart began to grow and produce a harvest, if you will. And that harvest was something that ended up with him dying in a very unglorified way, I guess you might say, on a battlefield with the Philistines. But tonight I want to draw your attention that we're staying primarily in one chapter. We're going to start in the last two verses of 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 57 and 58. And then we'll pick up in chapter 18 and work through the major portion of it in order to develop our story this evening. Because you see, our story concerns Saul and David. We've looked at Saul. We've looked at some things about Saul. We looked at David last week and the slaying of Goliath. But tonight I want to see these two as they're brought together and what happens. And I want to start with this statement. Popularity has its price. Let me say that again. Popularity has its price. After David had slain Goliath, immediately he's brought back to Saul, and questions are asked about whose son is he, where does he come from. And one of the things that we see right there in the very beginning, actually it's in chapter 18 verse 1, as David is apparently talking with King Saul, Jonathan, King Saul's son, is watching all of this, and there is a statement, and it is the idea that Jonathan admires David greatly, to the point that, as you see in chapter 18 verse 1, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved David as himself. As an indication of that friendship that grew out of that meeting and that situation, Jonathan gives David of his royal attire. He takes off his robe and he gives it to David. He takes off his armor, he gives it to David. He takes off his sword, he gives it to David. His belt, his bow. He gives all of these things to David as a way of saying, I admire you, I respect you. I want us to have a friendship with each other. And that friendship went on to the point that Jonathan stood up for David when his dad turned against him. But what begins to happen from that day forward is that it seems initially as if Saul promotes David. Because what you find is that on the day that David kills Goliath, Saul honors him with a promotion. No longer would he come in and serve solely as a musician before King Saul and as his armor bearer. No, now the point that is made in verse 5 is that he becomes a leader in the army of Israel, because Saul sets him over the men of war. And the thing that we're told there is this: all of the men, all of the people, and that included Saul's servants, were pleased with this promotion. They thought highly of David. And David went, according to verse 5, wherever Saul sent him. And here's the beautiful thing. And he prospered. He was successful, one translation says. He was an individual who, and this is literally what the text says, he behaved wisely. He conducted himself in a wise way on the battlefield. And the men noticed that, and he became a man that others wanted to follow. But the problem is that Saul's jealousy began burning, all the while just below the surface. The flame had been lit, as I've already said, and it was lit on the day that the army was returning from the battle with the Philistines that involved Goliath. Because as the army is coming back home, the young women are coming out to the street, they're dancing, they've got their tambourines and they're singing, and they sing a song. And the song has basically two lines that are recorded for us. Saul has slain his thousands, but David his tens of thousands. Well, now put yourself in King Saul's shoes for just a moment. You hear that being sung as you walk by. You're at the head of your army. You have been leading them in battle. You've had victories already, and yet you hear this. And David is receiving great honor from these people that have come out. So suddenly there is this pain that Saul struggles with. It is the pain of being replaced. He sees what's happening. As a matter of fact, we're told that it displeased him. It angered him. He became very angry. And he says to them, he says, they've ascribed to David 10,000s, but they've ascribed to me thousands. And then he asked a question. What more can he have but the kingdom? And I dare say that these words no more than left his mouth before suddenly he remembered something. And I think what he remembered that day was something that had been said by the old prophet Samuel not too long ago when he was coming back from another battle and he had not been faithful as he should have been. And Samuel, having had his robe torn by Saul, was being told that the kingdom was going to be torn out of his hand. And then the statement that he made to Saul is, the Lord has sought out for himself a man after his own heart. Folks, I believe that Saul began to put two and two together. And he began to realize on that day, this is that man. He's the one that God is going to replace me with. And it didn't sit too well with Saul. He didn't like that idea, because what he began to immediately see is that David's popularity was the fulfillment of this prophecy that Samuel had given. And here's something to think about. You know, the severest form of jealousy often rears its head when the population or the popularity of one person, or a person sees his popularity or her popularity suddenly being replaced by the popularity of someone else. People no longer notice that person like they used to. They begin to notice someone else. And that person begins to realize, people don't pay as much attention to me as they used to. They're paying more attention to this individual over here. I don't like that. And jealousy begins to kick in, and it begins to work in that person's heart. And in Saul's case, it was doing just that. You see, Saul had been the national hero of Israel. You go all the way back to chapter 10, verse 24. After Saul has been anointed, and Samuel has pointed him out as the king that God has set forth over Israel, and the people said, "Long live the king." And then when you come to chapter 14 of 1 Samuel, and you look there in verses 47 and 48, you're given a quick summary of some of Saul's successes. Because there we read, now when Saul had taken the kingdom over Israel, he fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab, the sons of Ammon, Edom, the kings of Zobah, and the Philistines. And wherever he turned, he inflicted punishment. He acted valiantly and defeated the Amalekites and delivered Israel from the hands of those who plundered them. You see, Saul had his victories, and people knew that, and Saul was the king. But now, because of David's victory over Goliath and the defeat of the Philistines, all of that has changed. And now it's David that people are beginning to notice. And Saul sees himself being replaced. So how does he react to that? How would you react to that if you suddenly saw someone becoming more popular than you, being noticed a little bit more than you, and thinking, that may be my replacement, that they're grooming to take my place? I don't know how I feel about that. And so what we find is that Saul begins to show forth some of the very emotions that are brought out by jealousy. Psychologists tell us that there are three primary emotions, things that come out because of jealousy. The first of those is anger, and that's exactly what Saul exhibited. As a matter of fact, he exhibited all three of these, because upon hearing the song that the women were singing as he is returning from the battle with the Philistines, and specifically with Goliath, it says that it displeased him and he became very angry and asked that question that we've just said, what more can he ask for? What more can he want but the kingdom? The second emotion that comes out of that jealousy is a thing called suspicion. You see, Saul lost his ability to be objective. He became paranoid. In his mind, this young upstart is out to take my position away from me. I'm not so sure what he's doing anymore. He may be working behind the scenes, and I'm just not aware of that. And so he was obsessed with David's popularity, as according to verse 8, from that day on. He paid attention to everything that happened with David. And then there is that third emotion that comes with jealousy, what we call fear. Fear that I'm fixing to be replaced. Fear that people don't think as much about me as they used to. And in Saul's case, fear because he saw God protecting David from his own wrath, as we will see a little bit later in this chapter. And because of his jealousy and the emotions associated with it, Saul began to act irrationally. It's interesting, jealousy will do that. It will cause you to act in a way that you normally would not have acted when you were thinking more rationally and when jealousy was not working in your heart. And so we begin to see what Saul does. His rage becomes uncontrollable. He looks for opportunities to kill David. As a matter of fact, on two different occasions, when David is there still playing his harp, trying to soothe Saul because of the evil spirit that had afflicted him, we find that Saul took his spear and he hurled it at David. And David did get out of the way each time, and it would go into the wall. And the thing was, Saul was saying in his mind, I'm going to pin David to the wall. That's what had happened to him. That's what his jealousy had done to him. It had caused him to begin to react in ways that were uncharacteristic of him just a few years before, when he was leading his people and doing what he should have been doing as a king. And it was after all of this that we read in verse 12 that Saul became afraid of David because he realized something. He realized that the Lord was with David, but that the Lord had departed from him. God is no longer with me. He's with David now. I see that. I realize that. And that had to hurt. And it was at this point that Saul does something. Still reacting to everything he knows and what he's feeling toward David, he removes David from his presence. No longer does he have David come into his presence. Instead, what he does is he appoints him as a commander over 1,000 men. And you see, on the surface, this appears to be another promotion. Oh, he's elevated David to an even greater position than he had him. But when you really look at what's going on inside of Saul's mind, you find out it's not a promotion. Not in Saul's mind. It's a further effort to try to get rid of David. Because in Saul's thinking, he knew that if he killed David himself by his own hand, that it would make Saul that much more unpopular with the people, because he had just killed somebody that the people truly thought highly of. So instead, what he's decided to do is, I'm not going to have it done at my hand. I will let someone else do it. By promoting David and giving him more responsibility on the battlefield, what he was hoping is that the Philistines would take his life. He'll die on the battlefield. One day there will be a battle and it'll be fierce, and he won't be able to get out of the way. He'll die. And to help his plan along, Saul does something. He gives his older daughter to David. Promises David Merab, his older daughter. But he places upon David a condition. The condition is that David be a valiant man and that he fight in the Lord's battles, verse 17. All the while, what Saul is thinking is, if you look at the last part of verse 17, is this: my hand shall not be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him. Let them do him in for me. And then it will seem as if I was elevating him. The people will be proud of that, and everything will go well. And I will achieve my goal in getting rid of this man. But you know, one thing Saul didn't count on is God in all of this. Because no matter how hard Saul works to get rid of David, the Lord's hand of protection and blessing continually are upon this young man. And what we read in verse 14 is that a little bit before that is, David was prospering in all his ways, for the Lord was with him. And the very next verse, verse 15, adds this statement: when Saul saw that he was prospering greatly, he dreaded him. He feared David even more. And on top, as if that wasn't enough, if you'll notice, the very next verse after that, verse 16, tells us something else. It tells us the people's reaction to David. And what it says to us is this: instead of Saul's actions working to decrease David's popularity, it worked in the reverse. He became even more popular, to the point that what we read is all Israel and Judah loved David. There are some powerful lessons in what I've shared with you just now. And it starts with this: jealousy is a universal problem. Jealousy is something that has been around since the beginning of mankind upon this planet. You go back to Genesis chapter 4 and you have two brothers, Cain and Abel. And one of them kills the other. Why? He's jealous. He's jealous of the fact that God likes one sacrifice, or God seems to care more for one than the other, than him. So Cain kills Abel. You come forward, and I'm skipping over some, but you come forward to Genesis chapter 37, and you see jealousy at work yet again. But this time it's not just one individual against one individual. It is 10 individuals against one individual, because then it's Joseph's brothers who don't like him. They hate him, so much so that they can't even speak to him in a pleasant way. It's jealousy rearing its head again. In one case, a brother is killed. In another case, a brother is sold into slavery and presumed later to be dead. Jealousy. It's always been around. And it will continue to be around. And while jealousy is a normal emotion, it's something that all of us experience at some time or another. As we grow and as we mature in our lives, we learn, typically from our parents, how to handle that emotion and how to handle it in a mature, constructive way. And then when we become Christians, we find that God works with us through His Word and through His Holy Spirit to help us fight that battle even more. But there's an ideal and there's a reality. The ideal is that we mature to the point that jealousy does not afflict us in the way that it seems to afflict those outside of the body of Christ. But the reality is that all of us find ourselves still battling with the sins of the flesh, and there are times when we too find ourselves succumbing to that thing we call jealousy and the emotions that go with it. And giving away to the temptation of jealousy in our lives, if we're honest with ourselves, probably happens a good bit more than we want to admit. We do struggle with it. You know, jealousy is not just a universal problem, not something that we all struggle with, but it starts with these feelings of jealousy. The question I have for you is, are the feelings sinful? No. The feelings themselves are not sinful. It's the way we respond to the feelings or to the emotions. You see, if you go to Ephesians chapter 4, verse 6, Paul there says, be angry and sin not. So it is possible to be angry, but to do so without sinning. Because he says, be angry and sin not, do not let the sun go down upon your wrath. So there is an action that comes out of that feeling, which if not handled in the appropriate way, results in sin. At the same time, there's another passage I would share with you. It is from the book of James, James chapter 1, verse 14, in which James talks about temptation. He says that each one of us is tempted when we are carried away and enticed by our own lust, our own desires, if you will. And then he goes on to tell us how that culminates in sin. He says that lust, that desire, when it has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And then sin, when it has accomplished, it brings forth death. So there is a difference between thinking it, feeling it, and acting upon it. Every one of us probably have been jealous of somebody. Maybe we've been jealous of a brother or a sister growing up, a friend, a co-worker, because we were passed over for a promotion or something else of that nature may have happened. And it's how we responded to that. Did we lash out at that coworker? Did we lash out at that brother or sister? Or did we learn how to be thankful that they were recognized and they were praised and that they received a reward and go on and move beyond that? The question is, how do we handle jealousy in our lives? How should we handle it? One of the things that I believe we need to do is the first thing is to deal with the root problem. And the root problem sometimes may be pride. It may be a hardness of our hearts. Our pride will not allow us to give in and say, I've done wrong. I need to change this. I need to work on this in my life. A hardness of heart says, I don't have a problem, you have the problem. It's not me, it's you. It's always putting the blame somewhere else than where it really should fall. And so dealing with the root problem, we've never, and if you look at Saul, that was Saul's problem. He didn't deal with his pride, he didn't deal with his hardness of heart, and even beyond that, he didn't deal with an earlier problem that set all of these things in motion, and that earlier problem was a problem of disobedience before God. It's because of all these other problems that when jealousy came along, Saul gave into it as well. So there may be other problems at the root of our jealousy. And even though God may give us other chances and other opportunities, as He did with Saul by giving him another chance with David, Saul did not pass the test. And the only way we can pass the test, the only way we can overcome our jealousy is to go back and say, why am I this way? Do I have a heart that just is unwilling to listen to somebody when they try to correct me? Is there pride in my way that will not allow me to accept that somebody can do something better than I can do it, or somebody is maybe better qualified for something than I am? Those are the first things that we have to deal with. Secondly, I think that what we have to do is we have to turn to God for help. When we're struggling with sin in our lives, that's where we need to go. Lord, help me with this. I cannot do this on my own. Something Saul never did. There is no indication anywhere in our text, anywhere that you're reading about Saul, that he truly turned to God and asked God to help him with this sin in his life. He didn't ask God to address the issue of his heart. If anything, he took matters into his own hand and acted upon them and fought against God's will. But we need to humbly ask God to look into our hearts, to examine us, and to see if there's something that is wrong. David prayed at the end of Psalm 139. If you look at verses 23 and 24, listen to what he says. He says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts. And see if there is a hurtful way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way." Do you ever pray that prayer? Do you ever ask God, search me, know my heart, examine me, see if there's something about me that needs to change, and Lord, change that. Make me that person you want me to be. And then one other thing I might add tonight is this. Seek help from other people. Sometimes there are people that know you as well or better than you know yourself. Saul could have done this, but he didn't. He could have gone to Samuel. He could have begged Samuel to please give him an opportunity. He needed Samuel's help. He needed Samuel to go to God on his behalf because he truly wanted to change. He could have gone to his son Jonathan, and I think Jonathan was as a grown man, would have said, "Dad, we can work out this. We need to go to God. We need to work through this." He could have gone to David and said, "David, I'm struggling with you. I mean, I love you as a son, but I'm struggling with you right now because your popularity among the people is skyrocketing and mine isn't. And I need you to bear with me right now because I'm really having a hard time. And I'm asking God to help me with this." But he didn't go to David, even though David was not his enemy. David had no desire to usurp the throne and try to take it away from him. As a matter of fact, he says on more than one occasion, I will not lay my hand on the Lord's anointed. That's what he considered Saul to be. Solomon said a long time ago that there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. Proverbs 18, verse 24. He also said in Proverbs 27, verse 6, that faithful are the wounds of a friend. When you put these two together, what you find is this. There's a friend that sticks closer than a brother because there are times that friend is going to tell you what you really need to hear. He's going to stick with you sometimes when your own blood relatives will not stay by you. And his wounds are faithful because he tells you what you need to hear because he truly cares about you. He wants what's best in your life. Folks, we need friends like that. We need friends who will, as we sometimes say, shoot straight with us. We need friends who will come to us and say, you know, I love you as a brother. I love you as a sister. I love you like I loved many of my own family, but I have to say this to you because I care so much about you. What you're doing is not good. You know, I know you. I've been around you all my life, and I can read you like a book. And I know there's something going on right now in your heart, in your life. And we need to work it out. We need to talk about it because it's not good. So we sometimes need those we can go to and say, help me. Help me work through this. Show me where I'm wrong. Pray with me. Stand by me. Correct me when I need to be corrected, but guide me in the right way. Because the truth is, there's not a single one of us that wants to be lost because jealousy controls our lives and we can't let go of it. You see, Saul's feelings of jealousy toward David drove him to the point that he literally destroyed himself. And we don't want that to happen to us. His pride would not allow him to admit his problem or to seek help. Don't let that happen to you. Don't end up the way Saul ended up because he could not let go of that which was destroying him. If Satan has used the green-eyed monster, as jealousy has so often been called, in your life and is tempting you with it, ask God, first of all, help me with this. Help me to defeat this. Help me to turn from Satan. Help me to run from this if I need to. But Lord, please don't let it take over my heart. And find other people. If you are struggling with that, find a friend. Find somebody that cares about you to help you through it. But don't let it take over your heart and your soul and destroy your eternal well-being. Tonight, maybe you're struggling with jealousy in your own life. I don't know. Only you know that. If so, if we can help, that's what we want to do. And maybe it's somebody that you need to go to. Someone that you need to sit down with, say, I've been jealous of you. I don't want to be, but I have been. I see how well you seem to be doing, and life seems to be going so well for you, and it's not for me. Help me overcome that. But tonight, if you're not a Christian, more than anything else, our song says, "Hark the gentle voice calleth tenderly upon your ear. Sweet his cry of love and pity. Call us, stay and listen, turn and hear." Do you need to hear God calling to you to come home? Are you listening for that still small voice that is saying, "I want you in my home eternally"? If that voice is speaking to you as we have spoken God's word, if there is in your heart an understanding, my life is not right tonight, don't leave here without doing something about that. If we can pray with you, if we can encourage you, if we need to baptize you because you're not a Christian and you're ready tonight to confess the name of Jesus as Lord and Savior in your life and turn from your sin, which is called repentance, and live your life for Him, if you're ready to do that, don't put it off any longer. If you need to come, do so right now as together we stand and sing.